I want to welcome everybody to the show, and today I'm going to be talking about the Silurian Hypothesis and the Precambrian Era and how they relate in the questions I have when you look at what science gives us and you look at our history. When you look at what science gives us and you look at our history and science contradict each other. And it's right there in front of us. So we're going to go over the Silurian Hypothesis and how that relates to potentially some things that could have happened during the Precambrian Era. And I'm going to start doing these episodes without a guest and start covering some of these things that I think about. I'm always searching, I'm always looking, I'm always going to try to find an answer to anything that's going on in my life, my family's life. Been doing some research up where I'm from to try to get an idea about where my lineage has come from, because I've had this spiritual thing that I've been going through. I want to know what it is. Where am I from? What is my bloodline? What's going on? So I spent a lot of time this summer up in Lake Lure, North Carolina, and I started looking at the Blue Ridge Mountains and started researching that and just looking at these granite hard stones. I mean, if you look at the stones that are up there in Lake Lure, North Carolina, which is the beginning of the Appalachian Trail, it looks like a fortress almost. Like I said, there's a lot of information up there that I don't think we have the answers to yet. We need to figure out what's in those rocks up there in Lake Lure, North Carolina, in the Blue Ridge Parkways itself. Because if you look at that area, and I started studying, I said, these stones, have to be some of the densest stones on Earth, and they are. And then I started looking at, all right, when was this area built? And I started looking at, this area, the Blue Ridge Parkway, was developed during the Precambrian Era. And I'm like, Precambrian Era, that's very, very interesting. Then the Precambrian Era was pretty much the beginning of Earth. That gets my mind racing and gets me thinking a lot about, what is up with this? Where am I from? This is where I'm from. This is where my bloodline's from. How can I research that? So then I started looking at the Silurian Hypothesis. And we'll get back to the Precambrian Era. The Silurian Hypothesis is a thought process about advanced civilizations living on Earth before humans. And when you think about that, and you look at the Blue Ridge Mountains and you look at those stones and you look at that fortress and you understand that these stones have been here billions of years, what is that? And I think we have to understand that something created the uncreated. And that's what we're going to discuss today, and want to go over a few things about the Silurian Hypothesis. And one thing, evidence. The most likely clues of an advanced civilization would be radioactive elements, carbon, and temperature variation, which, if you understand how those stones were built, all those things happen there. Difficulty. Direct evidence of such technologies, artifacts is unlikely to be found due to the rarity of fossilization in the exposed parts of the Earth, because we're talking billions and billions of years ago. Researchers may find indirect evidence in climate change, anomalies in sediment, and possibly in nuclear waste. Also about the Silurian Hypothesis, we need to try to keep an open mind. Adam Frank and Gavin Smith published this information in 2018. So I think this goes hand in hand with what I was discovering in Lake Lure, North Carolina, and trying to find out, where I'm from, what's going on with my enlightenment, what's my bloodline. And I started looking around up there, and I just felt like these stones are somewhat talking to me. I went up to this one stone, and we always would go in the middle of the lake at Lake Lure, and you look and you see these stones. There's Chimney Rock up there, right? Everybody knows Chimney Rock's up at Lake Lure. And you see these stones, they just, they look like pyramids. Show you some photos of how these things looked, but they look like pyramids. When I started thinking about that, and I started looking at Chimney Rock, and I noticed there's one sign up there in Chimney Rock that says Chimney Rock is a granite monolith. If you look up monoliths, and you understand how monoliths were used biblically, it's very, very interesting that there's a large granite monolith in Lake Lure, North Carolina. Because I had this intuition that Lake Lure, when you looked at Lake Lure, I didn't even pay attention to this. But I had this intuition when I started diving into these stones. I said, this is the pineal gland of Earth. And here's something else, being the pineal gland of Earth. I said, why do I think this is the pineal gland of Earth? So I did an aerial shot of Lake Lure. And when you did an aerial shot of Lake Lure, it looks like the pineal gland. Like where the water, it shows the water, and you do an aerial shot in the shape of it, looks like the pineal gland. Because if you go in the center of Lake Lure, that gorge is 100 feet deep. I mean, that's a pretty deep gorge, and I haven't seen many lakes that are that deep. I know I was there this summer, and I was in one part of the lake, I think it was 78 feet, 80 feet deep, somewhere near the center, but I think it gets close to 100 in some areas. So it's a very, very deep gorge. So I knew that there was a granite monolith right there, which is Chimney Rock. I grew up there, been there for years. And then I started looking. We always used to see this other stone. We call her Lady in the Mountain, or Lady in the Mountain. Looked like there's a lady in the mountain or something laying there. A lot of people have called it different things. When I looked at that thing, I said, that's looking towards this granite monolith. It's looking way towards this granite monolith. And when I'm looking at that, in this granite monolith, I'm looking at that. So I went up to Lake Lure, and you see this head, and I'm going to show you a picture, and I'm going to compare this picture. You can see this picture, right? I went up to the park, I took this photo, and I lined it with the potential Sphinx-looking figure that's in the Grand Canyon. Then I lined it with the actual Sphinx in Egypt. One time I did a session with a Reiki master, and I'm sitting there laying there. And she does this session with me, and supposedly this Reiki master can go back in time and know where your Akashi records come from. So we do the session with my Reiki master, name's Tina Clark. I do the session, and she tells me that my bloodline is from John the Baptist. And the rationale of that was that they believe that the Cherokee Indians are one of the original tribes from Israel, right? Because their language is very, very similar to Hebrew. I found out as well that I am a descendant of W.T. Whitaker, who was a Cherokee Indian chief in Oklahoma, and he's originally from North Carolina. And then also, mother's family, her side of the family, they lived on Balsam Mountain. And Balsam Mountain's been a very spiritual place. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's the highest point in the Blue Ridge Mountains. This is where my mind starts to race, and I start to think about this, and I'm like, all right, how do I put all these pieces together? So going back to the lake, we always see the rocks. We thought it was Lady in the Mountain or whatever, and then when I see this one sign, this oldest sign that you see when you come down from Asheville, you can see the sign. It says it on the right. It says this Morse family bought this area and so forth, and it calls Chimney Rock a granite monolith. So here's the kicker about this. So when I went up there and stood between this rock, right, Lady in the Mountain rock at the front, and, Chimney Rock, the granite monolith, looking at that. So when I took my compass and put that in between there, this rock is exactly going west, perfectly looking at this granite monolith looking west. So I'm like, that's very, very interesting. So why did I tell you about my bloodline? Well, if, the thought process was that, the Egyptian bloodline came here, and that stands the reason, the natives and so forth. But the kicker, when I start looking at these rocks and understanding this area, these rocks are pointing exactly, west. And when back in the day, the Sphinx and the potential Sphinx that's in the Grand Canyon, back in the day, they would use those things for astronomy. So when you use those things for astronomy, the directions had to be perfect. So this aligns perfectly west. These rocks are looking perfectly west at this granite monolith in Lake Lure, North Carolina. And I'm like, wow, that aligns. And then I said, this rationale about the pineal gland, where did that come from? So then I find out there's a place up there called the Light Center. The Light Center, which, quote, they say has a vortex. The Light Center in the Vortex is literally about 10 miles from Chimney Rock, the granite monolith. So I roll up there, and I go up there, and they have a prayer room and all this, and I go in the prayer room, and then I find out there's a meditation rock up there that's 3 billion years old. So I'm like, very, very interesting. So I'm questioning all this stuff, what's going on here? So when I get up there and I sit in this room, I do feel like the energy is like, they say that wherever there's a vortex on Earth, it represents part of the human body. Hence, my rationale about the pineal gland. Where did that come from? Aerial view of Lake Lure looks like the pineal gland. Very strange. Never looked at it this way. Grew up here, looking at these rocks. It looks like a fortress. And this is the beginning of the Appalachian Trail. And I always used to hear stories about back in the day that the natives would not settle where Chimney Rock is. So it was so spiritual, that area, they would not settle there. So I go up to the Vortex. I walk down to this meditation rock in the middle of Black Mountain nowhere, and it's literally raining. I'm by myself. I walked 25 minutes in the woods by myself where there's tons of bears everywhere and pouring the rain. Didn't see any snakes, didn't see any bears. Made it down to Meditation Rock, and there's some footage I'm showing you about Meditation Rock. They say the rock, that Meditation Rock, is 3 billion years old, and this is where this vortex is. Going back, thinking about the Silurian Hypothesis, thinking about the Precambrian Era, supposedly started 4.6 billion years ago. And we're going to go over some stuff here, some statistics and information that you can look at, to kind of back this up. Thinking about this, I'm on there, I go down there, I see the rock, I'm meditating on the rock. I can feel the energy in the area, definitely more energy. And then I talked to a few of the ladies, some older ladies that have been there for a long time at this light center. And they've been there for a long time, and her one lady's husband, think about the pineal gland. One lady's husband says that he saw a vision by this 3 billion year old rock that this was the center of Earth, the beginning of Earth. So we're thinking, all right, 4.6 billion years ago, that aligns. I was told, because I have Native American on both sides of my family, so all this is starting to align. So I have Indian heritage on both sides of my family. A granite monolith 10 miles away. We have a vortex supposedly at this light center, and energy feels really, really strong there. And this one rock that I align with the potential Sphinx in the Grand Canyon and the Sphinx in Egypt, align that, looks very similar, points exactly west toward looking at this granite monolith, thinking that, the natives, the gods, use this for astrological information. Why is it so perfect? So I'm starting to think that the more and more I dig into this, and if this was the beginning, right? Because they say that this Blue Ridge Parkway area is the only area on Earth that never changed. If you look on NPS.gov website, Precambrian Geology East, and when you look at this thing, right, and these are all rationales I had, and I started backing up this information, Precambrian Geology East, and you look at the red, that it shows part of the Blue Ridge Parkway, North Carolina, Virginia mountains, and then there's the next part says Precambrian and Paleozoic era, which is purple, and the whole Blue Ridge Parkway area is purple. This is where this comes to reason that this looks like a fortress. It looks like a fortress. It's never changed in the test of time. They've tested these rocks up here. I haven't found any print about the actual rocks being 3 billion years old, and I don't know why they haven't printed that. But we need to figure that out and take some archaeologists up there, because they say some archaeologists from around the world came there and identified that these rocks, this meditation rock, was 3 billion years old. So NPS.gov, you look at these colors and you start to realize, what's going on here? So let's think back of what the Silurian Hypothesis says. When this area was being created, I think we have to start to understand that something created the uncreated. So all this stuff is aligning for me. Then I find, I'm going to read this to you. Listen to this part of the story. Now this will blow you away. The NPS.gov site backs up the colors. They align. All right, we have a vortex. We have a granite monolith. This looks like a Sphinx. The reason I'm going here, and this is where I'm from, if this is true, there's and I'm part of this bloodline, there's a bloodline that came from this area. If this is true, this is all questionable. I'm not saying this is true or whatever, but if this was true, there would have been a bloodline from the Precambrian era, would have predated Egypt. Think about that, because this area was before a lot of stuff, a lot of shit. So think about that. That changes a lot. That's a big statement. because this is what my Reiki master told me. Then I start to check all this stuff, and it starts to align. I find information about the Silurian Hypothesis. I start finding information about the Precambrian Era, the granite monolith, the alignment, looking directly west. This stone that looks like a Sphinx type fixture, aligned directly at this monolith. Because if you think about it, if those stones are that old, they're very, very worn. They're very, very worn. And like I said, we have to remember that something created the uncreated. So here's another piece. This is where science, to me, contradicts history. I'm going to read this to you. The Precambrian encompasses nearly 90% of the history of the Earth and around a third of the history of the universe. The Precambrian begins with the formation of the solar system 4.57 billion years ago and extends to the beginning of the Cambrian 540 million years ago. So obviously that was the beginning of creation. So if you understand something created the uncreated, and this is the beginning of creation, and the universe is tied to the human body, there had to be some type of body, spirit, soul, something during this time period. I don't think it was just a living organism. I really don't think it was just a living organism, because they say that there's a certain time period that there wasn't enough oxygen in the air where humans could not live. Maybe they breathed differently. Maybe they had a different way of living. Because if you look at history, we're trying to take these absolutes based on what's going on today instead of trying to understand creation. Because if we understand creation, then we know the answers. And that's where I go, there's two mindsets in the world. There's a creative mindset, and then there's a discovery mindset. 99% of the people are in discovery mindset, right? So if we understand creation, and this was the beginning of creation, based on what science is telling us, what's the deal? I think there was more going on that we need to find out. And I don't, why would I have a granite monolith at the beginning, the Precambrian era, where the Precambrian era started? Why would there be a vortex right there? Why does this align exactly west? We know these stones are very worn. I've been going through this enlightenment, spirituality. I feel like these stones are talking to me. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out myself as well. So when you look at that, and you start to think about that, and then it continues to say, over this immense time span, the solar system condensed form a cloud of dust and gas, and the Earth was violently accreted from the collisions of smaller bodies. Organ molecules were formed, and life originated from the resulting soup. Interesting statement. In a very short period, geologically speaking, the progenitor cell of all modern life evolved, then diverged into the three great domains of modern life on Earth: the bacteria, the archaea, bacteria-like organisms often living in extreme environments, and the eukarya, which are protists, fungi, plants, and animals. Now there is a little something there. If there's plants and animals there had to be oxygen, right? And the other thing is, in that area up there, certain types of species of plants that only grow in that area. There's only one type of salamander that would only grow in that area. There was old wives telling about the natives would fight over this tobacco plant that had healing powers. Very powerful healing plant that had healing powers up in these mountains. And you can look up the legends and stuff up there at Lake Lure. But this is something, I think we really have to look at. We really have to look at these things, and we really have to understand these things, and what do these things mean to humanity and to our history of Earth. Because this, what I just read to you, is very, very interesting. And then it says, after I mentioned animals, then it says, over the next 3 billion years, these three domains of life diversified into the incredible variety of organisms appearing in the Cambrian explosion. So it's saying within these 3 billion year period, there were plants, there were animals. And if creation is tied to the human body, there had to be some type of soul, human type body before these plants and stuff, right? Think about that. I don't think we grew from a plant animal. I mean, that's so naive. Going back to Silurian Hypothesis, understanding that, something created the uncreated. And I'm going to continue to go down this road. There's a lot of questions there. Well, I should say a lot of creation when I talk about this creation part. Let's recap. The light center, vortex, granite monolith, rationale that Lake Lure was the pineal gland of Earth. The gorge is a 100-foot gorge. Aerial view of Lake Lure looks like a pineal gland. Directly west alignment that looks like the Sphinx. The granite monolith is a biblical thing. Monoliths were biblical things back in the day. And, the powers that be, the gods, whoever, would use these things for astrological directions and information on how to design the earth. The earth never did change in this area. These are all things we need to question. The Precambrian area was 90% of the earth's history, which is wild when you think about it. So I think these are things we all need to start questioning. And, if there was ancient civilization prior to what we assume is our world, it could have been a whole different look. But if there was plants and animals within that 3 billion year period, I don't think that we evolved from a plant or some kind of animal from the sea. That's what I question. The Reiki master Tina Clark telling me that my bloodline was from John the Baptist, and that's the area I'm from, and I have Native American on both sides of my family. It makes it for a very, very interesting thing to explore, and I'm going to continue to explore and try to find out more. But go check out the Silurian Hypothesis. Go check out all this information that I've stated. It's all there. A lot of this information is right there in front of us, but there could be stuff right up under our nose. And then, the next episode I'm going to do an episode on the Dam Act. Lake Lure falls in the part of the Dam Act. The Dam Act was something the president passed in the 30s, gave people a lot of work. There's some very odd things happening right now where all these dams were made. The Clinch River in Tennessee found a pyramid in the bottom of it. My mom's family lived on top of Balsam Mountain. They got Judica Rock up there with all kinds of these prints up there. Balsam Mountain's supposed to be the highest part. So there's a lot of things that are out there that I think we need to keep questioning and trying to find out the answers to. There was a lot of dams made during 1925 to 1940 called the Dam Act, right? But it hit a lot of shit as well that we're uncovering today, and Lake Lure was part of that whole deal. And they flooded that lake very, very fast. Why did they flood that lake very, very fast? And why is it 100 foot deep in the center of that lake? It's very intriguing to me, and that's what I'm going to be reporting on. The next episode I do on the Unimpressed Podcast without a guest will be about the Dam Act during this time period where they flooded all these areas, and now they're finding artifacts and ancient civilization information where this stuff was covered up. So be on the lookout for that. I appreciate you listening. Let's keep discovering and trying to figure out these answers about humanity and our history. My name's John Edmonds Kozma, CEO of Bang Productions. Thank you.